Okay, this is episode 1 of the DAWk Show, and I'm super happy to have my friend Mike Bankhead on the show because he's one of the first people I told about this show that I was starting. So,
You
hi,
did.
Mike.
Good morning, Gail. Well, I'm like really honored to be the first guest, blazing the trail.
Yeah, you're doing the thing. And one of the funny things that happened is Mike and I were going back and forth on what to name this show. Do you remember some of the ridiculous DAW puns that we came up with?
I do not. I remember being sad that I didn't end up with the final name. I think I might have said, I think Dockward was one of mine.
Dockward. Yeah, there was Dockward, Whoopsie Doddle, Daw-splaining.
We had like 2 or 3 days worth of DAW puns.
Yeah, it was amazing. And then my husband was like, the DAWk Show. And I was like,
yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So, oh well. Anyway, you're here on the DAWk Show. Go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about what you do in the world.
What I do in the world, well, as related to the topic of this podcast, here's my elevator pitch. You know, we just went to a music conference. We should all have our elevator pitches fine-tuned. I make hooky Midwestern rock with strong power pop influences. That said, I write in a whole bunch of other genres too, but that's like my default. So yeah, I'm a musician, like Gail.
So you're a musician. Where would you say you're at on your like production journey? Like where are you at as far as the production world of things?
So as an older guy, that word production means something different to me than it means to younger people. I'm a Generation X person. So for people younger than my generation or that are used to pop music, that word has taken on the meaning of the person that makes all the music.
Mm-hmm.
In my generation, in the music I grew up listening to, production or a producer was the person that oversaw the project. So to relate this to the IT world from whence I came one day, that would be like your project manager. That's the person that handles the finances, that the band talks to, and they decide together what the track listing is going to be. The producer has their hand in everything. So I consider myself a producer by the old school definition of that word.
Okay.
I do not consider myself a producer via the making beats in the box version of that word. However, in the modern music landscape, it is useful to have some kind of rudimentary recording skills. So I do have some very rudimentary recording skills. And apropos to this podcast, I have a DAW, and I use it to get my ideas down in a coordinated enough way that I can show the idea to the engineer who's going to record my song, any of the musicians that I wish to play on my song. I basically sketch out what I want to happen in my DAW. Those files that come out of that are horribly low quality because I don't have the skill set to make them professional recordings.
Mm-hmm.
Nor am I inclined to spend the time to learn. I feel like I could, given enough time, buy enough gear, soundproof the room, learn how to be an engineer, but I'd rather spend that time getting better at my instruments and writing songs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't mind paying professionals to do all the professional sound stuff.
Yeah. You know, and that's important to know, like, where your area of expertise is and if you want to go down the rabbit hole or if you want to pay other people to go down the rabbit hole. But yes, and that's a really important thing to communicate. So thank you for, sharing your perspective of where you're at as a producer. And you've so you have the projects that you put out this past year. So Hold the Wick, I think, is an excellent example of how you're like communicating with different people and like putting ideas in and then showing them to other people to do remixes. Can you talk a little bit about the Hold the Wick project?
Yeah, that's just a simple little pop song that I wrote. And I had an idea for what I wanted it to sound like. But before release, what I wanted to produce was something that reminded me of my youth. That's YOUF, youth.
Your youth.
Yeah, when I was a teenager, you could go to the store and buy a CD single.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes, kids, that's a compact disc. But instead of only having one song on it, the single would come with a whole bunch of other songs. And those were called B-sides, which is, of course, a holdover from the old vinyl days when there was a side A and a side B, blah, 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 blah. So instead of for your $12 or $14, you buying one song on the disc, you would get 3 or 4 or 5 or sometimes even 6 or 7 songs. And that's the experience that I wanted to try to recreate digitally with Hold the Wick. I didn't want to spend the extra expense on actually producing compact discs for the project. As you might know, Gail, that costs a lot of extra money if you're going to get hard copies.
Right. Yeah, and then you go to your gigs and you're like, who wants a coaster?
Yeah, that's how it feels like sometimes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to replicate that experience digitally. I have a whole bunch of other songs that I could have recorded, but that would have cost me a lot more time and money to make Hold the Wick and then have 3 or 4 different songs. So what I decided to do was make the stems available to other musicians in different genres. This part was important to me. Musicians that had different styles. Some of them are actually, all of these people have varying degrees of engineering and production skills. That was kind of a prerequisite for the project, right? I made the stems available to them, and I'm sure that Gail will define that word at some point on this podcast.
Yes. So, I mean, very briefly, but yeah, stems are the different parts of the song. So each of the individual tracks. Yep.
Stems were made available, and I told all the people, hey, do a remix of this, please. Do it however you wish. I gave no further instruction. I got back so many disparate things. There were some of the people on this assignment didn't even listen to my original track. They got the stems, ISO'd the vocals, and then rebuilt the entire track from scratch. Which is why if you listen to Rizzo's remix, he basically turned it into what sounds very much like a Nirvana song. That's the direction he decided to go. But he used completely different chords than the ones that I wrote the song with.
Oh, that's so cool.
But it works because he was basing it on the melody, right? I got a smooth jazz remix. Now, Rich doesn't like it when I call it a smooth jazz remix, but that's what it sounds like to me. So sorry, Rich. One of the lovely people that I've met at the conference, and you've met her too, Nina Pelligra from Syracuse, New York, made a very lush, big mix that sounds like Evanescence, but with a whole lot of extra vocals on it, kind of, because her main skill set, in addition to being a fantastic engineer and producer, Nina is a choral vocal arranger for a cappella groups. Like, that's what her education is in. So she can sing and she knows how to put voices together. That's what hers sounds like. A gentleman from the Netherlands that I met on Twitter, showing that Twitter at one point did have value for networking.
I will remember you. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, the Twitter fellow whose name is No Money Savant, which he represents as a $sign instead of a euro sign. So that tells you which market he's trying to sell to, right?
Get it? Yeah.
He basically made a hip hop beat track. Took all the lyrics out and just turned it into like a beat that if someone wanted to rap over it, they could. So I have all of these very completely different takes on the song, and then I send it all off to get mastered so that it sounds reasonably coherent. And I'm sure at some point Gail will explain what that means.
Oh, yes. Let's explain mastering. This is going to be like a segment tag at some point, right?
Well, I figure if this is the first episode and someone listens that doesn't know these terms, they might be like, why are these musicians talking over my head, right?
Right, exactly. And here on the DAWk Show, we try to explain things so that we're bringing you into the jargon. So when we talk about mastering, that is where you're looking at the whole track as a whole. You're getting it up to the everything up to the right loudness level, and you're like compressing and limiting, and you're basically taking all of the different bits and pieces of the mix, and you're looking at it as a whole song, and then doing like the fine tuning from there. Right. So
on this
yeah.
project, the mastering engineer, I'm handing him 8 songs, and
Mhm.
so he wants to make it sound like a cohesive, like they all came from the same person, even though they didn't. And since all of these were so different, and each person has their own kind of process when they did a remix, he said it was an interesting challenge. But I think it sounds really good. I was obviously I released it. If I didn't like it, I would have not released it. I was happy with the results, and that's something that if you want to hear a whole bunch of different takes built with the same puzzle pieces, go listen to Hold the Wick.
Yeah, and I will link that in the show notes, as it were. Yeah, no, that's really cool. And I was listening to it earlier, and I think it was the more the guy with the dollar sign in his name. That one.
No money savant.
No
Shout
Money
out.
Savants one was the one I was listening to while I was like I had your stuff on while I was like doing my miscellaneous tasks and things, and then I was like, wait a minute, is this still Mike? What's happening? Oh, this is
it is.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you listen really carefully, I mean, since I've listened to the song 1,000 times, I can tell which pieces he kept, and which he didn't. A couple of the specific guitar hits, he definitely kept, but that's what I wanted. It doesn't really sound like me, but the pieces that I created in the studio is what was used to build that, which is why it's a remix and not a completely new thing, right? But he's creative. He does his own thing. Actually, he's in music college right now over in the Netherlands.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so
that's so cool.
So and obviously his skill set's going to grow, right?
Yeah. And I think the takeaway from this project is it just makes me think of something my directing professor said in college, that like 90% of directing, and this can also apply to producing, is picking the right team. It's casting, right? And so to a certain extent, a huge part of producing is just like picking the right people and getting out of the way and seeing what happens.
Yeah. And, collaboration is important to me. And I think as musicians, a lot of us embrace collaboration, and we should. Like, no human being is an island, as the old saying goes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's like one of my favorite things is producing a track and like sending things off to another musician and getting the stuff back and being like, "Oh no, that's perfect." It's like I come from the improv scene, so it's very like yes and I think it's just very cool to see these things reflected back at you. Awesome. Okay, so yeah, that process like sounded amazing. So you have another new track out, and that is the one that you wrote for your wife for Misty. And I gotta say, I love the atmosphere of that track. So I guess tell us a little bit about the process of making that track happen.
Sure, I can go super deep dive on this because I'm pretty proud of it. It turned out a lot better than I thought it would. So, as you know, Gail, but as the listeners do not, most of my music tends to be a little bit on the angry or melancholy side. Like, I don't really do happy songs, and I certainly don't do love songs. So I had never actually written a song for or about my wife before. And she's cool with that. She'd accepted that as part of the cost of doing business by living with me, right?
My husband's the same way. Yeah.
But our 15th anniversary was coming up, and I wanted, I'm not really good at buying presents, but I can write songs of varying degrees of goodness. And so I decided that this would make a decent anniversary present. The actual song came out of a writing prompt from a songwriting group I'm in online called the 5 and 5 songwriting group, where you write one song a day. When the assignment comes around, you have to write one song a day for 5 days of a business week, thus 5 and 5 songs in 5 days. This specific prompt was take a chord progression from a song that you like and basically steal it, use it, and write a song using somebody else's chords.
Okay.
So that's what I started out doing. And you want me to tell you what song I stole the chord from?
I'm very curious.
Or do you want to? All right. I was going to see if people could guess, but no, I'll tell you. Let Down by Radiohead on
Okay.
their 1997 album, which I think we can call a classic now, OK Computer, which might be my favorite album ever made. It's one of my favorite Radiohead songs, and I took the verse chords for my verses, and I took the chorus chords for my chorus. Now, you can't copyright a chord progression, but you can copyright a melody. So I couldn't take that melody, nor would I want to. I'm writing a song for my wife, not a song about how I feel like I'm a letdown, which is what letdown is about. So I'm trying to change the mood is still a little melancholy just because of the chords, but I'm trying to change the feel by messing with the melody. So
yeah.
I was
So the
sorry,
base of the song is no, you're cool. You're cool. So the base of the song, the harmonies are the same as the Radiohead song, but you're changing the melody to match the storytelling and making that part happier.
Correct.
So yes.
And really, that's why it doesn't. Once you know that, you can probably hear it a little bit, especially in the chorus, but that it doesn't really feel like that particular Radiohead song at all. I was very careful. I got the piano out and I made sure to write the melody and avoid some of their note choices as much as I could. That was a challenge for the chorus because the note choices they used in their chorus were kind of the most logical ones. There's only so many notes we have to go with a certain chord set. But I try to get around that by messing with the rhythm. So I played through the chorus chords faster than they played through the chorus chords in the original, and I added a couple extra. The prompt didn't say you can't like add stuff to it, so I added more chords to make it a little bit more complex and also kind of take your ears away from the original if that would start to creep in your mind. So that's where I started. I knew I wanted to incorporate some elements of Radiohead's songwriting and arrangement. They have some atmosphere. They have interesting layering, interesting guitar stuff. But what I also wanted to do was essentially write an Elbow song. Elbow is a English band from the city of Manchester.
Okay.
They're one of my favorite bands. My wife also loves them. They're a band that we like. We both like. We've been to see them 4 times. When they come to the United States, they only go to big cities. So we have not seen them anywhere near home. We live in Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
We've seen them in Atlanta, in Washington, D.C., in Detroit, and in San Diego. So they come stateside. We'll go wherever we have to go to see them. But she likes them, and I like them. And so with the skeleton of a Radiohead song, I wanted to build an atmospheric arrangement that was reminiscent of an Elbow song, especially try to pull at the same kind of emotions that Elbow tends to pull at. Some of the things that they do, and this is probably a contributing factor to them not being very popular stateside, they don't really write a lot of 3-minute, 20-second pop songs.
Oh no! How long are the songs?
Well, sometimes it takes them 8 minutes to say what they want to say.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely. And sometimes you got to do that.
Sometimes you got to do that.
Yeah.
They also, some of their songs, they build them with a repeating motif or repeating phrase, and they're never in a hurry necessarily to go to the next section. They now for a young listener, they might get bored listening to the music like that. But this is a band that likes to build atmosphere, layer different instruments. They're trying to put you in a soundscape, right? So on some of our favorite songs from them, it might be like a minute before the words start, which is, again, with pop music, you're never going to hear anything like that. I wanted to build an atmosphere much like they did.
Yeah.
And not like rush through the song, which is why For Misty is like a 6.5 minute song. That's why it ended up that long.
Yeah. Okay, that all makes sense, and like I'm just thinking of like the specific sound choices too. Like so, like what do you have going on with that? Like there's a synth at the beginning.
There is, and this is where I give the co-producer who, actually by the modern definition of production, he's the producer.
Okay.
Rich Reuter, who is the one that did the Hold the Wick smooth jazz version.
Okay.
He engineered this, and this is the first time I've worked with him on a release song. And I had to throw him a whole bunch of song references so that he knew what I wanted. So I threw him a bunch of Elbow songs and a bunch of Radiohead songs so
Yeah.
he understood the feel. And then I
Yeah.
let him make some of those choices. So I was like, I want to go after this feel. I want to build this song from a quiet, pretty place. And we sat there in a studio and he picked different sounds for the intro as we were building it. And I was like, yep, that one, nope, that one. And but most of those choices, like there were some initial choices that I made, but he did a lot of building of the track when I wasn't around based on what I told him I was after, and he chose well, I would say.
Nice. What do you know? What out of the reference tracks? Which this is a thing, audience, where like when you're trying to communicate sound ideas, you just send like a playlist of things, and then that just kind of goes into your brain, like goes in your brain blender, and then you can make more choices, right? It's the same thing with like visual artists as well. But do you know which song like most inspired that track? Or was it like a full blend?
The Elbow songs that I sent him were Kindling, which in the notes that he took on that were their vocal tone, proximity effect, and I have no idea what that means. Basically, he's adding engineering terms that I don't understand.
Okay.
Also, I borrowed. There's a certain lyric in that song that my wife really loves. And probably because the imagery reflects some experiences that we have had about train travel specifically. And I alluded to train travel in the first line of the song. So unless you're an Elbow fan, that wouldn't remind you necessarily of anything, but that idea was lifted from Kindling. And then the other song that I suggested that he listen to was Magnificent, but a specific version of it, apparently, which must have been a live version or a stripped down version, but the full version would work too. But this will make more sense once I share these documents with you, and you can kind of get a feel for how, like I explained to him, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. And he's like, this is how I will accomplish that.
Cool.
Because again, I'm not a real engineer and I'm not an in the box producer. I just know what kind of sounds I want. And I am sometimes able to explain them to someone. And then what I was paying him for was to go get me those sounds.
Yeah. No, and that's like part of the thing is like is having that teamwork of like I would like these sounds, and then having someone who can find the specific sounds. And sometimes you are both of those people.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
It was a very rewarding experience to work with Rich. I've known him for probably, I don't know, 5-6 years. He's a very talented musician, but he approaches music from a different place than I do because we have different influences. And that's the reason I really wanted to work with him. Because all of us as musicians have certain limitations, and at least personally, I feel that my limitations might be preventing me from getting to a creative place or a quality place that I can't see. And so specifically wanting to work with someone that approaches music differently and has a different skill set, he'll hear something or see something or identify a way to make a song better that I might not be able to see because of my limitations. In fact, he's going to produce my next full-length record specifically because of that. But as it affects this project, one of the things he did was I was like, I need a bridge here, and I had some ideas, but he basically said, yes, you do need a bridge. Let me do it this way. And he's the one that composed that entire section of the song.
Oh, cool.
Which means I gave him a co-write credit because he wrote some of the music.
Yeah.
He was noodling around on his guitar for a guitar solo, and I'm like, I'm a bass player. We're not going to have a guitar solo, but I'm going to steal some of those notes. So I basically copied a bunch of his guitar solo for the bass solo that you hear in the song now. He's the one that said I was like, should I have a third verse? Elbow, they have a lot of their songs with a third verse. He's like, you should definitely write a third verse. So he convinced me to go ahead and write the third verse. When I did, and we were in the studio on the day I was going to track the vocals, he was like, yeah, these lyrics really aren't good enough. You can do better. He said it in a nicer way, but that's what he was saying. You can do better. And so I rewrote the third verse there in the studio, and I did better. So he was able to like pull better art out of me and didn't let me settle for good enough. Like, why settle for good if you can go to a next level? And I told him that's exactly what I'm looking for whenever we get around to making my next full-length record. Like, if you think that I can do better, say that, right? Like, let's shoot for great if we can at all get to great. So the song wouldn't be nearly as good as it is without him. So thank you, Rich. I'm going to make sure he listens to this.
Yeah. Yeah. He sounds like someone I might have to have on the show at some point, too.
You have to have Rich on the show. I agree.
Okay. Great. Good. We're just going to put that out there.
You'll love him. He's great.
Awesome. Well, and I think that's so important to highlight what he did too, because like I've heard that someone referred to like the producers are like the midwife of the song, and the engineer is like the doctor, right? Like,
well, in this
or something like that. You know,
in this case, he did both.
Yeah.
And to get really deep into it,
yeah.
The only thing. He doesn't have a live drum set at home, and so he could obviously put in fake drums, but I'm an old guy, and I want real instruments whenever possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, nope, we need to track real drums. So we went to a studio in Dayton. It wasn't my first choice. Actually, it wasn't even in Dayton. It was outside of town in Troy. Trojan City Studios. Nice job, boys, there at Trojan City Studios. My normal engineer of choice was very booked up because he's very in demand, because he's very good. So when you can't get in, like any business, you can't get into the one that's full. You try to find one that also does quality work. And so this was my first time working with the guys at Trojan City Music, and they were great. And we went up there and tracked the drums for a couple of different songs. And I had a fantastic experience. But yeah, needed that live drum feel. And Rich, to his credit, was there on drum tracking day. And I basically, for the most part, shut up and let him run the session.
Yeah.
So like the engineers are engineering and the drummer is drumming, but Rich was the guy driving the bus as far as explaining what kind of musical choices to make.
Oh, cool.
And I would only chime in with I like that or I don't like that. And then every now and then I would have an idea, let's try this. And usually those didn't work. But I didn't know they wouldn't work until we had the drummer do it. And then we listened back to the playback and I was like, ooh, why did I say to do that? Don't do that. So I was, he humored me when I had an idea that didn't really work out. But it's another case where he was able to get, here's the feel I wanted. This is, here's how we want you to play in the second verse. You'll notice that the drums are not like, they're kind of, I don't want to say they're whimsical. They are sparse and kind of playing, because the bass is really doing the heavy lifting on the rhythm there. The drums are kind of like around and through, and which is a thing that Elbows drummers have done on some of their songs, and I'm not going to remember the terminology that we use, but basically what I wanted to hear out of the drums, we were able to get, and that is also a lot thanks to Rich.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Kyle, the drummer. Always compliment your session musicians, folks. Kyle Sweeney did good work.
Awesome. In addition to producing music, you also produce a podcast.
Is that what it's called? Does it really called producing a podcast? I don't really.
I mean,
I've never
you host
really
a
podcast
and then you make the things happen with that podcast.
I do.
You are making the things happen with a podcast. I think that's called producing.
You just reminded me that I was supposed to put out an episode this morning, and I didn't get around to editing it this week, and it didn't go up.
So my question was going to be, how's that journey been of podcast production and the world of content creation? Ugh, wow. I hate that word.
Oh, I hate it too. Ooh.
I hate it. Ew.
So the reason I started a podcast was really based on my music. I'm name dropping a whole lot of people, but that's because I believe in collaboration. You should give credit where deserved. There's a music consultant who's kind of an expert on helping musicians promote and do stuff in their career. He's in Ohio and he's from Cincinnati. His name is Michael Stover on Twitter. You can find him at Big Stowe. And one of the advices he gave, is that a word?
It is now.
One of the suggestions he gave was, hey, if you're making a record, you should have a podcast with a record that has remixes. You should make a podcast and talk to all the remixers because hashtag content, but also like behind the scenes, and it's something that's an easy conversation. And I thought, I'm about to make a record that's got 7 remixes on it. I should do that. So that was where the podcast idea started, was taking that suggestion for hashtag content and executing it. And then I thought, nobody's going to want to listen to a podcast if the only thing I'm doing it for is to promote my records and singles, right? And I like talking to musicians. Heck, I like talking to any person that's interesting. There's a lot of things I'm interested in. And people, one thing I have learned is that people, if you give them a chance to talk about something they're passionate about, are really interesting. Even if the topic is something that you might not have had a lot of interest in, you give somebody a chance to go into detail on something they're an expert in, learn stuff. And then also around the same time, I was dealing with a particularly nasty depression episode. And my doctor said, you need to have a meaningful conversation every day with someone who is not your wife.
Okay.
Podcasts are meaningful conversations. I don't really get one every day, but it's having regular conversations with people. Having regular conversations, I find to be very helpful.
Yeah.
So that's where it started. Where we are now, I've been working really hard on the podcast to not say
Yeah.
You don't realize how often you say until you edit a podcast, and then you're like, why do I say that so much?
Yeah.
So I've been trying.
Yeah. Here, friends, we're going to show you, if you're watching this on YouTube, this is what an looks like. I'll edit that in later. Have fun with that, future Gail.
Nice. What's beautiful is that I've gotten so used to taking them out that I actually recognize the waveform in the DAW now.
It haunts you. It haunts your dreams.
The episode that I was supposed to put up today was episode 70.
Yeah.
So I haven't quit.
Yeah.
And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 episodes recorded in the can that I need to edit. And I have 3 or 4 more scheduled for next week. You've been on my podcast, Gail Gallagher.
Yes, I have.
There's another I really should have you back sometime to talk about your new podcast. You were episode Gail, you were episode 4.
Yeah. I feel like we'll be trapped forever if I go on your show to talk about your podcast after you're on my show to talk about your podcast.
Isn't that how it's supposed to work, though? But
yeah, I think that's how it's supposed to work.
We recorded our conversation on December 17th of 2021, so that was almost a year ago.
Yeah.
I edited it on December 27th, and I released it on January 21st of this year. Yeah, episode 4. You should drop a link to that in the show notes that people can hear you talk about your record.
Yeah, absolutely. I will do that.
But I like it. One of the things I've learned is I do not like editing.
Yeah.
As evidenced by the fact that I did not edit the episode that's supposed to go up today. If I had the money, I would pay someone else to edit. I love having the conversations. I love the talking. All the other stuff is work, and I don't like doing that.
Yeah.
But you have to, right? It's part of the gig. So let me talk about how I do it. Since this is the DAWk Show.
This is the DAWk Show. Can I see your DAW?
You can. In fact, what's in it is not a podcast. What's in it is the song I wrote yesterday for the 5 and 5.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
All right. First of all, I should probably have you enabled the screen sharing?
I think so. Yes.
You have. All right. So share. Well, first I'll talk about the podcast because it won't take long.
Okay.
I record the podcast usually on Zoom, much like this one. When you're done, Zoom dumps a file onto your computer, and I import that file into Reaper, which is what is just open here on screen. So I import the recording into Reaper, and then I do all of the editing in Reaper, and I have an intro and an outro, and then I do some voiceover stuff.
Okay.
Very simple. Every now and then, I get someone local, and they'll come over, in which case we just record straight to Reaper. Right?
Okay.
They have a mic, I have a mic, I have a 2-channel interface. So they're in one and I'm in the other, and straight in.
Yeah.
This is Reaper. It is very affordable. The reason I got it. Essentially, this is a software company that if you are an independent person, They'll let you have it for the small cost of $60.
That is super cheap for a DAW.
It is
like
super cheap.
Logic is in the hundos, but yeah.
It does everything that all of the expensive DAWs do. Now, it might do those things a different way, and you might have to work to figure out how to do them all. But one can make professional recordings with this DAW. And the other thing I like about them is when you trial it, they don't hold any of the functionality back. There are companies that if you trial their DAW, they'll give you like a stripped down version with not a lot of oomph. Reaper gives you the whole thing, the real thing. And to me, a company that's willing to do that I felt good spending my money on them.
Yeah.
So I had no problem coughing up my $60 and buying it. I like it. I've had to have people help me to show me a few things, and there are some things that I used to know how to do but don't remember how to do. And sometimes there's something I want to try to do this, then I can go on the internet and search. But for a guy that's not good at DAW stuff, I find it totally useful. Now, this is a language you speak, Gail, so I know that you know what you're seeing here.
Yes, I think we need to explain a little bit because this will be our first DAW screen share situation.
All right, you tell me where to click, and I will do.
Love it. So, let's break down, just taking it from the top to bottom, where our tracks are. So if you look at the lines going horizontal, those are the individual tracks that are happening. Okay. And so walk me through what different tracks you have.
Sure. So this particular song, I wanted to start out, this was another 5-in-5 song, and one of the aspects was to make it sound an echo like you were shouting from the mountaintops or something.
Love that.
I forgot, I didn't really pay attention to most of it after the word echo. Yeah. I was like, oh, echo. I have an effects pedal that I spent a lot of money on this year, and I should probably learn how to use more of the cool things it does.
Yeah.
Let me just break out some of all those delay and reverb functionality. So I took out my line 6, and instead of, now you could do that in the DAW via these plugins and such.
So do you time out? Do you know how to or put your audio through to the Zoom so that you can share your audio from the DAW?
Yes.
Yeah. Then we can do a little example.
Yes. So actually, it might not work because Reaper doesn't like it when I have other software up, but we'll see.
Okay, cool.
Like us talking will probably compete with Reaper for the sound resources.
Okay.
But I'll try it. So one of the things it doesn't like it when one of the things that I like to do is instead of using the effects in the software, I go ahead and record it with the effects already on it.
Okay.
So I'm not like sending, I guess you could explain this. I'm not sending a wet signal. I'm not sending a dry signal and then filling with it. It's all wet when it comes out.
Okay. So what that means when we talk about wet and dry signals, so dry signal means like it's just you talking into the microphone and then you add the cool stuff after you've recorded it. A wet signal means that there is reverb and delay and things on the mic while it's happening, and so when you speak, there is much echo and coolness and reverb and things.
Yes. So because of the prompt talking about echo, I decided to use a whole bunch of delay and reverb effects. So this one is the multi-pass reverb effect, and I've named the track bass multi-pass, and it is on the left. You see I have it panned to the left.
Okay.
So it only comes out of that side of your headphones. Then this is the Cosmos delay effect, and I have that panned to the right. And then there's one in there that's like is a reverse effect. And my favorite engineer told me that back in the day, to get a reverse effect, you had to record it, go find the tape section where it was recorded, snip the tape, flip it, splice it back in. Now software does reverse for you. So sound recording has come a long way. So this is a delay, but it's a delay in reverse. So it's got this weird wavy swell to it.
Okay.
Which makes it a challenge to play when you're putting it in wet because it doesn't come out at the same time you play it. But I like kind of the texture it gave.
Okay.
This one is a reverb, and this one is just me on the bass clean with the volumes kind of down, playing the root notes so that all of the echoey stuff feels grounded.
Okay. And
And
just
then
to clarify, this
Sorry.
bottom part is your mixer. Yeah?
Yes,
Okay, cool.
which I
So
barely know how to use.
okay. So basically, friends, I'm using my teacher voice. Oh gosh. So
No, go ahead.
friends,
You
here's
are
what
teaching.
we're doing. Audience is friends. So you have the lines at the top are the individual channels, and then at the bottom you have the sliders, and those control the sounds of those individual channels.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I dumped I dumped all of these 5 bass tracks into one track.
Okay.
So this controls the volume of all of them together, right?
Okay, cool. So that is it? So would that be considered a bus, or
I don't
no? It's a
think
sum.
so. Because I
Okay.
Googled how to do a bus and I couldn't figure it out. I know it's a thing. I just don't know how to do it.
It wouldn't be a bus. So what a bus is it's like if you have like a verb or you have a reverb that you want and you put it on its own thing and then you send the individual tracks to the reverb channel so that like you have those everybody can get a little bit of reverb paint from the pool that is over there. It's like a pool of reverb, and you can just take a little bit of what you need. Yes.
All right.
Great.
This stuff is in the song like twice. It's there at the beginning, and I brought it back for the bridge. So I played it separately each time because the notes are different.
Cool.
And then bass, which is my main instrument, those tracks are here. So this right here is the main bass. But when I'm writing at home, I kind of write the song in pieces, right? Verse, chorus, pre-chorus. So I also record it in pieces because when a song is new, I haven't memorized it well enough to be able to play it all in one go.
Yeah.
So I have basically a bass track, a bass under it with distortion on it, which was again sent wet. Separate bass for the bridge part. So like I basically broke up the bass tracks for the parts of the song that they happen in. And
I just let that pun slide. It's okay.
You don't see it, but there's a lot of these. I did multiple takes, and then after I was done, glued them all, so it looks like I did one take, but I totally didn't.
Okay.
Here's some piano crashes on some chords.
Nice.
Also panned left and right. Basically, it's I've got a lower octave on the left and a higher octave on the right, but they're playing the same thing.
Okay.
Piano stands in for guitar on my home recording since I don't play guitar. Even though with my effect pedals, and if I play high enough on the bass neck, I can make it sound like a guitar. But this is the main piano chords, and then all the rest of this stuff is vocals.
Nice.
How do I get to it all? There we go. These are the vocals that go with the big chords, and I'll send all this so you can figure out what to play and what to not. And then I have a harmony on the left and a harmony on the right with both of these.
Okay.
The verse vocal, the pre-chorus and chorus vocal, the bridge vocal, harmony in the middle, and backing vocals, which are panned left and right, because my engineer of choice doubles everything, and I have learned to do that from him.
Okay. And doubling everything just gives it that extra thickness.
Yeah.
So it's basically means you record it twice. You record twice on top of it. You don't copy paste.
You don't copy paste.
You don't copy paste the same sound because it causes nonsense.
Doesn't sound real.
It doesn't sound real. But when you layer yourself, when you record something again on top of each other, the tiny differences in the recording make it sound more real. Yeah.
My engineer, and I should also shout him out because he's great, Patrick Himes of Real Love Recording Company here in Dayton, Ohio. His default for rhythm guitar is double everything. And often he'll do it with, he'll change up the texture of either the guitar, like a different guitar for the double, or not always, but sometimes, or a different amp or distortion setting. And even if you're trying to play the same thing, like, we're not machines. So there's those little light differences just adds a nice texture and feel. They don't make it louder, which is something that I learned. Is when I started doing this, I was like, well, wouldn't that make it louder? No, you've got volume buttons for that. It just makes it thicker.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah, it doesn't make it louder. It makes it thicker. Yeah. Love it. Cool. And what I'll do is I'll insert the track, you know, in the piece perspective of you are in songwriting mode, and this is sort of the choices that you make when you're recording something in songwriting mode. Like this idea where it's just like, okay, cool, I'm writing this song right now, which means I'm gonna just break everything apart, and it's gonna be a little, you know, it's creative chaos, right?
And I think a lot of that has to do with my limitations and my skill set. I don't play guitar. If I played guitar, I would just play through the entire thing and sing at the same time, probably. Now, I do sing my songs at the same time as I'm playing them when I play live. But that's after I've written them for a while, I've perfected them, I've taken the time to learn the song, I've done a lot of practice. I wrote this yesterday. So, like, without reading the lyrics and looking at the chord chart I wrote, I didn't necessarily remember how to play the entire song front to back. But I can remember one part. So that's why I recorded it in parts. And I wanted certain textures in the verse. And again, if I eventually go to the studio with this is what I'll take with me to the studio. I'll be able to tell the engineer and any musicians that are in, this is kind of the feel I wanted. This part of the recording, we're going to replace it on the real recording with this thing. This part of the recording, we're going to replace with that. So I've basically done a studio arrangement, but in my own rudimentary, not very skilled at all way.
And, you know, and that is, but what you're doing, if your intention is just to know enough to communicate an idea and you can do that, then that's all you need.
Gather round the table. Time flies faster when you're wasting it.
So we are rounding out our time, and it's time for some rapid fire questions. So here we go.
Is this where I'm not supposed to think and just say the first thing that comes to mind?
We might go on tangents. I'm going to attempt to be rapid fire, but we'll see how fast we go through this. So, describe your favorite plugin as if you're 8 years old in like 30 seconds. Your favorite plugin or piece of musical technology.
You said plugin first.
Okay.
I don't need 30 seconds. I need 3 words.
Okay.
Makes bass bigger.
Make bass bigger. Okay, which plugin is the one that makes the bass bigger?
I have no idea because I don't understand my plugins, but I pull up the list and there's a couple of them that are like they're called like bass boost or something. Okay. I'm like, that's what I want to do. And that's
Okay, cool. Make bass go boom. Love it. What's a skill that you've learned that you're really proud of in the music technology realm?
Oh, in the music technology realm. I am not proud of anything because I am not good at music technology.
Okay. What's a skill as a producer?
What a downer.
Okay. I'm going to make you say something nice about yourself.
And you know I'm not gonna, because that is not my skill set. I pay professionals to engineer the records and make the songs sound good.
Okay. What is a skill as a musician that you're super proud of?
I think I make musical choices that are out of the ordinary, and I embrace dissonance in a way that many people who write in my genre of music do not. So I guess I would say I am proud to be different.
Love it.
That's specifically about the music composition. Yeah. I write the music I want to make. I gave my elevator pitch, and I do have like a genre I go to. But that said, I've put out a salsa song last year. I put out an Americana song last year. For Misty doesn't sound like anything I've ever done. I put out a French language lullaby waltz in 2019, and I have an EP coming in 2023 that has every song's a completely different genre. So I am proud to be crazy enough to try to do a whole bunch of different stuff instead of just doing the same thing all the time.
Yeah, that's absolutely valid. All about that life.
I don't like it how you make me try to say nice things about myself. It's very uncomfortable.
Well, here we are. I'm sorry. This is who I am as a host. Okay. Now, what is an area of tech that feels overwhelming or you are just like at the tip of the rabbit hole on?
Digital audio workstations and everything they do. It is like when I'm in a studio with someone that knows what they're doing and they're just zooming around doing a whole bunch of cool things and making noises come out that sound good, and I'm like, it just looks so like there's just so much, and I don't
Yeah.
like just simple things like we record some bass or guitar tone and they pull up 17 plugins and they shape the sound somehow, and I'm like, it sounds a little muddy in the 14 megahertz range. Like Patrick can just like know the whatever the wavelength of the frequency that he doesn't like, and then go take out that one wavelength and then it sounds different. I'm like, whatever.
I would say frequency recall is something I'm at the tip of the rabbit hole of as well. I know like where like the no frequencies live, like in like the like 10K stuff like that, where it's just like the really higher sounds, like the sounds that are higher than like this keyboard, those and they just like you feel them in the front of your face. Those like I know where those live and like the general scope of it, but I'm not quite at the like we're gonna take out like 10K here. I just have to like I just swipe it around and figure it out.
All of that stuff, basically all DAW related stuff is like a foreign language to me. And it still and I say this as a person that speaks a couple of non-English languages.
Yeah.
There's a point when you learn an additional language where you see it doesn't look foreign to you anymore, even though it technically is, but you've learned it and I am not at remotely near that point with any of this music software stuff. It still looks, even for the things I know how to do, it still feels foreign to me.
Yeah. I think what's been helpful to me is like Chris Bradley, I think was the one who said, you don't have to know how to take the car apart in order to drive it.
True.
So... but sometimes you get in a phase where you're really into cars. Yeah. So then my last question is, if you could invent a piece of music tech through the power of magic, so science has left the room, what would you create?
Wasn't it Arthur C. Clarke that said that any technology that is far enough advanced is indistinguishable from magic?
Fair. I'm glad that there's a quote with that.
Like, I feel like if you showed our mobile phone to somebody in 1750, they'd be like magic.
Yeah. It's the future. You've invented a cool piece of music tech. What is it?
Interface with my brain.
Okay.
Such that the musical idea I have goes right into the thingy correctly, without me having to figure out how to tell my fingers how to do it and then figure out how to do it in the thing. Like, the music that we make all starts in our mind somewhere, right? But we have to use a third-party tool, in my case, this electric keyboard, my bass behind me, the DAW. We have to use all these other tools to take what we're hearing in our brain and put it in a recorded form. And then, nope, that's not it. And then in my case, fiddling around on the piano until I find the note that I want or the series of notes that I want. And that's very time consuming. And then you can lose the idea. But like a direct interface from brain to recording device, where I can just be like, think what I want to happen, and then it happens, would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't know what we would call it, though.
Oh, probably something with a Z instead of an S. I don't know. Um,
So basically, American spelling instead of British spelling. Got you.
Yeah. Well, we'll workshop that. Thank you so much for being on the DAWk Show. So I guess tell the audience a little bit about what you got going on right now and like where they can find you and all that good stuff.
Well, what I got going on right now is I have an EP previously mentioned where every song is in a different genre that Gail has heard, but you're not allowed to hear yet. Gail's heard it because she's my friend. It's coming out at some point in 2023. It's the mixers are done. It's off to the mastering engineer. It is the most open and vulnerable thing I've ever done. The project, all of the songs are about uniquely Black experiences. And that being the case, all of the personnel on the project are Black people. Engineer, producer, all the musicians, art director, videographer, mastering, like everybody. As a conscious artistic choice for just this project, that's the aesthetic. It's a concept EP. So Black experiences, Black personnel, every song in a different genre. So R&B, punk / dance, funk, gospel, blues, Americana. So it's as a cohesive artistic statement, it's the best thing I've ever done. My website where you can find everything about me is mikebankheadmusic.com, also at mikebankhead.com. All of my music is there for free if you want to stream it. Even the EP I put out, not EP, a split record I put out in 2019 with another artist. My songs from that split are not on any streaming services, but they are on the CD and on my website. So if you want to hear those, mikebankheadmusic.com. And I would really like it if you sign my mailing list so that I can email you and tell you about all the really cool things that I have coming up. And of course, I'm on the socials. Facebook page is Mike Bankhead Music. Instagram page is Mike Bankhead Music. Twitter feed is M Bankhead Music.
Ooh.
Mike Bankhead on Polywork for those of you that use Polywork. Mike Bankhead on LinkedIn for those of you that use LinkedIn. I generally am cool talking to people, so if you want to connect and talk, I'll talk. And if you are interesting, and you probably are, you could certainly be a guest on my podcast, which is called You Could Be My Aramis, Aramis. It's one of the Three Musketeer dudes, by the way. And that's available wherever you listen to podcasts. End of shameless self-promotion.
Ba-bum! You did it! Thank you so much for listening to the first episode of the DAWk Show. Make sure to subscribe wherever it is you're listening. And also, tell a friend about it. And check out Mike's things, all that good stuff. All right, I'll see you next time.